this is it. Welcome to the Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud. Firstly, because I can't believe I'm starting a podcast. That in and of itself is like pretty intimidating to me. Secondly, I can't believe I'm saying Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour out loud. Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour was one of the first ones I came up with, but it's also been the most controversial. So I'm so tempted to like read through the list of the rejects, but something about that feels like a bad idea. If I change my mind in the future, maybe I'll discuss all the reject ideas, and maybe one of them is actually better. There's a good chance a lot of the people listening to this podcast found it through my YouTube channel, Benny the Vegan. And being on YouTube, having a channel, it does involve having a camera pointed at you quite a bit. But here's the thing. On my YouTube channel, I'm on the street, in public, talking to strangers. And in that setting, it's so easy to forget there's a camera there because I'm absorbed by the conversation and by this person I'm talking with and by the topic. We're usually talking about veganism. Sometimes we're arguing about it. But that conversation is one I get lost in, and I love being social. Right now, I'm by myself in my van, which we also should talk about, looking at the camera. That's a little weird. And then also, I have a background in music. I'm actually a recording engineer. I used to be one professionally. So being on this side of the microphone, talking into the microphone, that's new for me. And for anyone who's ever had to listen back to their own voice, it's weird, right? I'm listening to myself right now on these headphones. That's weird. I'm in my van. So some of you might know I live here in my van, and some of you may not. So this is my home. And because I'm recording right now in my house/van, and I have this microphone on, that's meant turning off all of the fans. There's no AC running. It is hot in this van right now. And that's going to be one of the weird things about the Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour podcast, is that we're going to be recording it in the van. That's the plan, at least. So someone will be sitting here. Someone will be sitting across from me, wedged in between the kitchen sink and the bed. If you're just listening without watching, this must sound so weird because, it's hard to imagine living in a van if you haven't seen one. So this is going to be the space, and there's going to be some weird things about making the podcast here in my van. First off is the obvious, what I've already mentioned. It is hot and stuffy in here. Usually it's not. I'm very proud of our van build. We have 2 fans in the ceiling. One goes in, one goes out, and we have really nice airflow. But I don't want to have those on while I'm recording. So temperature, this is going to be it's going to be a hot podcast, let me tell you. Here's the other weird thing about this podcast. I actually recorded my first guest episode yesterday. I'm not going to announce who it is quite yet. But we were recording here in the van. I was parked in his driveway. So during the episode, there's like church bells going off. Some guy's mowing his lawn next door. Like, we are subject to the elements, right? You better hope it doesn't rain during an episode, because when it rains in this van, you really hear it. I don't know. Maybe that'll be like everyone's favorite episode. Maybe I should only record during rainfall. That could be nice too. So back to the topic, Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour. It was hard to come up with a name for this thing, let me tell you. And so I was listening to one of my favorite speeches. It's also one of the most famous speeches ever, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And if you haven't gone back and listened to that recently, I just highly recommend it. It just gets better every time. It's like it is a piece of art. It's like listening to your favorite song. It's like it is so musical, and the cadence. I'm not even talking about the words. There's that too. But I mean, God, just the speech and the cadence and the tone. It's like there's melody to it. There's rhythm. It's unbelievable. On top of that, the message. Oh my God. I mean, what a wordsmith. A poet. During Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, he has this one line he says during it. And I couldn't believe it when I came across it, because I had never really heard it mentioned before. I'm not saying I discovered it. It's not like I discovered a line in Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, but I came across a line that I hadn't heard discussed before. And should I read it off my phone, or should I just insert it here?
We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force.
Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. That resounded with me so deeply as an activist myself, in my case, a vegan activist, animal liberation activists, because what takes place in the animal agriculture industry and the environmental destruction that, is then a result of that industry, it's all so violent. I mean, I don't believe there is a single industry displaying greater violence, causing more harm, more suffering than the animal agriculture industry. Not only on the 2.7 trillion animals, we kill each year, but again, back to environmental destruction, just the natural habitats, the rainforests we're destroying, the ecosystems and species we're destroying. And then, of course, the toll on human health as well from consuming animal products. Going off on a bit of a tangent here, meeting physical force with soul force. And that is what I have seen already in the vegan movement, and it's what I hope to nourish and continue to be a part of and to continue to see grow in the vegan movement, soul force. But that's not the name of my podcast. My podcast is the Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour. Why? Well, I was going to go with soul force, only to discover that force doesn't rhyme with power. Like, I messed that up. Force doesn't rhyme with hour as well as power, right? Vegan Soul Force Radio Hour. It's not bad, right? Vegan Soul Force. Maybe I should have called it Vegan Soul Force Radio Hour. It's too late. It's Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour. See, that just has a ring to it. So inspired by Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, meeting physical force with soul force. But no, we are the Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour. Welcome to the radio hour of Vegan Soul Power. All right. So firstly, if you're watching this video, you've probably noticed my coffee cup is we'll make a cut and then my coffee cup was somewhere else on the table. That's because I get a little nervous and I have to take a sip of my coffee and then I put it down somewhere else. But being nervous is what I wanted to come back to. I think I started this episode by talking about nerves, being in front of this microphone, looking at the camera. You can probably relate. But I think nerves and fear, I'm imagining those are going to end up being a central topic on this podcast because fear is something I know every activist is feeling often when they're going to activism. On the flip side, I think it's something a lot of activists feel when they're not being active, right? What is the result of my inaction? Am I creating the world I want to live in? But a lot of non-activists who are vegans are experiencing fear and nerves as well. It's scary to think about being active, whether that means going out on the street to a cube of truth or going to a vigil, getting in front of a camera and recording a video. These are all scary things. And beyond that, I think we all know one or two non-vegans who are scared to go vegan. It's a scary change. So it's no matter where you look, fear is holding us back. It's holding our friends and family back. Fear is the big thing. I'm trying to overcome it right now by making this podcast. But fear has, sure, it holds us all back. But looking back to times you've overcome that fear, those end up being some of our biggest triumphs. Like this van. That's why recording the podcast in the van, other than the fact that it looks cool, is also really meaningful to me because when my girlfriend Ari first came to me and said she wanted to live in a van, I was like, are you crazy? That sounds like a horrible idea. I don't want to do that. Really, I was just scared. That was a scary idea to me. You give up our apartment? What about my job? How will I make money? Live in a van? Who lives in a van? No one lives in a van, right? It's unfamiliar. It's weird. It's scary to uproot your life and live in a van. And so clearly, here I am now. I live in a van. One of the best things I've ever done. I mean, just for so many reasons. I mean, the time we've been able to spend together, the adventures we've gone on and are going to continue to go on. Taking that leap, confronting that fear, doing it anyway, has afforded me opportunities and given me experiences I never would have even dreamed of. A few months ago, we crossed the border into Mexico in this van, and we spent 2 months in Mexico. We drove all the way down to the bottom, the Yucatan, and then drove back up. Make it sound like we did it in a day. We were there for 2 months, exploring different cities and finding water, camping at waterfalls. It was unbelievable. Also, the activism it's allowed me to do. It, again, if you've seen my YouTube channel, you may have noticed I'm kind of popping up in different cities all the time. That's because of this van. We travel around the country in this van, really trying to do as much activism as we can. So, God, like this van, I like to think that the opportunities we're getting from this van, really from overcoming the fear of living in a van, confronting that. I don't know if I overcame it or if I just confronted it. Either way, doing that has like opened me up to so many opportunities, unbelievable experiences. The same thing with going vegan. I wasn't even terrified of going vegan. It was like, I just thought it was, well, that's not true. I was terrified. What I told Ari, I told her that the van was a stupid idea. I also told her that veganism was a stupid idea. I didn't think there was a reason to do it. And so I allowed my curiosity to let me just watch a documentary. It's like, yeah, I thought it was dumb. I thought it was a restrictive, scary lifestyle. But we watched the documentary anyway. And even as I turned to Ari, my girlfriend, and I told her, well, I guess we're vegan now, I was scared because the next thing I told her was, what are we going to eat for breakfast in the morning? That whole story going vegan, I'm sure that'll come up in the future. I'm spending a lot of time talking about fear and nerves, probably because I'm nervous right now. The point I'm trying to make is that I want to spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about the things that hold us back from creating the version of ourselves we'd like to see, and what holds us back, the fear, the nerves, from creating the world we want to live in. I think that's what it means to be an activist. Being an activist, I think, just means taking an active step to create the world you wish to live in, to create it as you wish to see it. I think that's what it means to be an activist. We'll explore that in the future. Here's what I want to wrap up on. Being vegan, I imagine there's many vegans listening to this. Being vegan can feel lonely, and it can feel hard, and it's easy to feel isolated as a vegan. A lot of vegans are isolated. I mean, I've met a lot of vegans who live in towns and areas where they really are like the only vegan, or at least they think they're the only vegan. They don't know any other vegans. Even as a vegan who travels around the country all the time, who has lived in large cities, you still live in a culture of non-vegans. And so within that culture and the cultural bubbles we live in, it's so easy as a vegan to feel alone. And whether you're vegan or not, feeling alone is hard, and it is not sustainable. Like, you can't go for years and years feeling alone and like function well. I don't think you can. I couldn't. And so, I have ended up finding such an incredible community of people within the vegan activism scene. It's one of the things I'm very selfishly grateful for when it comes to becoming an activist. I didn't become an activist to be a part of a community, but that's how I found a community. And selfishly, I'm so thankful for that. And when I see other vegans, or I talk to other vegans, or I get messages from other vegans telling me I'm like the only vegan, my family, makes fun of me, and none of my friends are vegan. I don't know how to talk to them. My coworkers ignore me, whatever it is. My heart just goes out to them, and I just want to tell them, just go get active. Go join, your local Anonymous for the Voiceless or your Save movement. Go check out a vegan potluck, whatever it is. But by becoming active, you inadvertently end up spending time with people and joining a community of people that feel exactly the same way you do. Getting to join that community and be a part of it is invaluable. It's empowering. It's inspiring. It gives you strength. I have found that in the vegan community, and more specifically the activism community, and I want to help it grow. I just have this feeling that the Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour can be a part of that growth. I want to sit across from people here in the van who are inspiring me, who are contributing to this community, and I want to hear what they have to say. I want to be friends with them, and I want everyone else who's listening to this, I hope there's somebody listening to this, I want everyone else to get to be a part of that conversation too, and get to feel like we know each other, we have a sense of each other, and we can learn from each other. That's the big one. We can all learn from each other. So I hope that this can be one of the many spaces exists where, we can just get together and support one another, learn from another. That's it. I think that's a nice goal for the Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour. Yeah. Okay, let's wrap this up. This wasn't horrible. I think that I'm going to be able to get used to this. Being on mic like this, looking at the camera. Anyone who's listening to this, my God, I'm so grateful. It means so much to me that you believe in this thing I'm trying to create. Maybe you're in your car, you're driving to work, or you're on a run, or you're doing the dishes. I love imagining someone living their life and having this on in the background. It's like I feel like we're friends, just the fact that you're listening to this. Thank you so much for, giving the Vegan Soul Power Radio Hour a chance. And I can't wait to share the first episode. I guess this is the first episode. The next episode with you. The first episode with a guest. I know that it's likely a lot of people listening to this will have found it through my YouTube channel. If you didn't know I have a YouTube channel, you can find it on YouTube. And it's Benny the Vegan. And that's also my name on Instagram. Benny the Vegan. And lastly, I just want to mention that I started a Patreon account, which is something I'm really excited about. I was nervous to do it, and I'm just so happy I did. I'm really hoping that having that Patreon will allow me to dedicate more and more of my time towards activism. Things like this podcast, street outreach, street interviews, doing exposés, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's so many ways to be active and so many ideas I have. I'm hoping that having this Patreon account will allow me to exercise as many of those ideas as I can, this podcast included. So it's also Benny the Vegan on Patreon. I'll link to all of those things either in the description of this podcast or in the notes or in the comments, or depends how you're listening to this podcast, but I will include links to those. Thank you so much for listening. Talk to you soon. Thank you.